Hello and welcome back to the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. Super pumped today. Special guest. This gentleman I met early in my recovery journey, and we'll get into it in a little bit, but he really helped shape some of my thought processes moving through recovery, especially early recovery, and I'm just so excited to have him here today. His name's Robert Bjorn Taylor.
Yes, sir.
Welcome. Man, I'm so pumped to have you here today and just to have a conversation with you. Talk through kind of your journey, your story, and I think that it's going to help a lot of people because it's what's unique to me about your journey and your story is not just like your redemption and your sobriety and your recovery. It's really the fact that you are still able, to me, be successful in your line of work, as closely tied as it is to some of these things. And I think that that's something that the audience is excited to learn about and kind of dive deep on. So I'm just pumped to have you here, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I've watched a couple of these now. You're doing such a good thing, man. I feel like it's platforms like this, it's conversations like this with people going through different experiences that allow people to understand that it's possible to live a lifestyle that's healthy, away from drugs and alcohol, man. And honestly, I'm only successful at my job because, I was able to see people who were in the same spot as me that, decided that it wasn't alcohol that dictated what they did. That was special, that bartending, that working in the service industry or what have you. It wasn't alcohol per se. It was like just the act of service in which you learn about service and active recovery in general. So we don't do the job to get drunk or to leave after work. And, it's an aspect of it, but we really get the most out of how we take care of people. And that's what was able to keep me in it. And I use that in every aspect of life in general, not just what I do in work. As serving cocktails, and thank God that I found like non-alcoholics and all that in order to, pretty much put a platform on mindful drinking, because it exists, right? But yeah, it's the service in general, and we take that into our own recovery journey as we allow ourselves to be around for those who are starting their journey, wherever it might be. I've helped out so many people that have relapsed. I've seen the stories of people who are just like me and reached 2-3 years now from having conversations with me. And again, there's no judge here. It's just always service. Like literally it is service. And that's where I came to separating myself from the bartender into a person who does hospitality for the sake of service. And being the active face in it allows people to understand they can do this sober. You can still serve drinks. There is a duality to it, but you have to accept the fact that it exists, but at least you're in the space being positive and showing that you can be a mindful drinker, you can abstain. And this is not just for your coworkers, but also for patrons. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's plenty of people who I've served over the years. I've been in the industry for almost 20 that have seen me, that know my journey from online, and they just look at me and they're like, yo, dude, I found a whole bunch of balance in my own personal relationship with alcohol. And it makes me feel great when I hear that, you know what I'm saying? Like they didn't stop completely, but they've understood that, they can take breaks, and that's helped their personal life. And honestly, dude, it's what I tell every friend that's going on this journey, if they're dealing with some sort of problem with alcohol or any sort of substance, it's so much better on this side. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's still harsh. Life's still harsh. It ain't gonna stop. It's gonna hit.
Yeah.
But reality feels so much better when you can take it on, like just going through it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You just have to go the fuck through it.
Yeah. No, I love that.
So
yeah, that's huge.
Sorry, yeah.
No, you're good. No.
It's already started off heavy.
We can rock. And I knew this was going to happen, and I'm pumped about it. Something you brought up interesting there before we take it way back. You brought up the patron. So for me in my journey, man, I missed the scene, right? I missed the ability to be around people that I felt were having a good time. Whether it was sports, watching football, concerts.
Oh God, yeah.
All these things. And one of my biggest fears early in sobriety was like, wow, I can never enjoy those things again.
Yeah.
And what's been so cool, and I share this for a reason, for anyone who's just starting out that's having these fears, it's totally possible to be in those environments and have a great time. I mean, the best time, and not drink.
Yeah.
I think it's important though, because I was terrified of that, man. I was like, man, my whole life, all the things that I've enjoyed doing, I can't partake in them anymore because there's alcohol involved. And really it's about, for me, it was just understanding that it exists there, but it doesn't have to coexist with me.
100%. Yeah. It was the same thing with me. That all has to do with, identity itself. And yeah, that's the thing. The aspect of alcohol and just it surrounds every part of social interaction for us as human beings. Our family, when you go to any family function, we're in the holiday season, you know what I'm saying? Like if you go home, bottles of wines, beers, kicking back, watching football, basketball, like everything is wrapped in it, you know what I'm saying? So, and it comforts all of us, and what I got to at some point was I realized, well, for one thing, I didn't really realize it just happened. I just fell into just being okay with just existing without a drink in my hand or a cigarette or having to go to the bathroom and do some blood or something, to function. Because I realized they're just as anxious as me. Once I was able to calm down and stuff, and it took a while. I'm not going to sit here and tell you as soon as you start the journey, and it took me about a year, 2 years almost to get, and my sobriety came through COVID. So like I wasn't around people for almost 8 months of my sobriety. I was locked in at home. But, you start to realize, and I say this out loud because I want people to understand this, everybody around you is as anxious. Everybody around you is as insecure. It is a security blanket sometimes that we use alcohol for. We want to celebrate, and I'm not gonna lie to you. Yeah, man, when you're going to a wedding, hell yeah, having a sparkling glass to celebrate the marriage of someone is dope. It's a beautiful thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But then it's like, it's the overconsumption, because we get caught up in it. Some people, like myself, yourself, we don't know how to turn those things off.
Right.
But that's what I'm saying. You have to start to identify that relationship. And you have to identify the factor that you can be without it. I've had so much fun. I remember actually one of the first experiences I ever had sober was actually a reception, and it was at one of my favorite bars here in Austin. I'm in the industry, so of course the people I knew, they had their reception at an open bar at a bar that I actively used to go to, and I'm only about 4 months, I think, or actually at that point 3 months sober, and it was the first challenge. But I remember as soon as a little bit of 3 Topo Chicos in and everything worn off, I got on the dance floor, I started dancing, and I don't know, the night ended up ending, and I was like, dude, I did it. It was such a achievement for me within that early part of my sobriety that I was like, damn, I think this is really it, dude, because on a regular, I would have I remember getting invited that night to go to the wheel. I don't want to put any bad things in the wheel, but I was like getting invited to go have some after hours fun and stuff. And I'm just like, nah, I'm good, and I remember knowing then, like, it wasn't like I fully knew yet. It was just this thing because, trust me, inside I was battling. I was like, this would be so dope, right? I've had a lot of fun. All the adrenaline had already gotten into me from dancing. It's like, I'm getting invited out. I'm being myself. I'm so cool. I'm so confident. But then I was like, nah, dude. For damn sure, if you go after hours, you're about to go to this after party thing, you probably gonna have one. And, again, it is easy to get caught up in that feeling, whenever. Fuck the beginning. I'm talking about even 5-20 years in.
Facts.
It's easy to get caught up when it's all adrenaline around you or, the celebration but you have to remember, stay within yourself. Stay within yourself and realize how good of a life you have outside of the drugs, the alcohol. And especially for those of us who already know we have an issue, realize how good of a life we have. And that's something I remind myself every day. Like, I have to, thank God for all the programs and stuff. I'm not an active AA person, but I am around a lot of active AA people, so the word is always with me. And I do read the big book, and I read other texts, and it is a remembrance that I am an alcoholic, that I am an addict. That reminds me that I need to stay coherent in these spaces, but also stay present. Mostly it's about staying present when I can acknowledge the fact that, hey, you have an issue. Probably don't do that. Don't continue to party, but definitely embracing a celebration. And I don't know, man, I don't want to ramble on it too much.
No, you're great.
But it's definitely an identity thing. When you're so caught up in that, I'm from an African family, dude. When we get together, it's all Heinekens, it's Hennessy, it's this, da, da, da. You know, I remember I went back to Africa, and I was actually, you know, after years, man, I hadn't been back since 1989. I went in 2021. And they kept asking me, this is 2.5 years of sobriety. And every family member kept asking me, why aren't you drinking? Why aren't you drinking? I was like, well, I'm sober. And it's like they couldn't comprehend it. They're like, you got to have some addiction. And I was like, oh, I bet you like having sex. That's one of my aunts said that to me, and it was the wildest thing that ever happened. I was like, watch out for everything. Trust me. An addiction is an addiction. But it was such a weird concept. And I want people to understand that even your family, you have to kind of weigh off, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's you. It's you and the people you choose to put in your life. And I'm going to choose to put my family in my life regardless of where they're at and stuff. And, of course, those that hold you down, you got to put your boundaries up. But I'm going to choose me first and those who uplift me. Those are who I put myself around. And that's another thing, too. You can choose to celebrate in any capacity. You can be in any space. I did not go into bars except for certain occasions because it was within my, it's my job. I chose not to make that a place I could be at, especially within 2 years. I remember 2 years in, I used to tell friends, I can't meet you there to play pool. I'm not doing that because I was in a place that I did not want to be in that space unless I was working. You have the right to choose that. You also have the right to choose to walk away when you're feeling triggered. Mm-hmm. That's powerful. Mm. You know, I remember when it was like the bottle had the power over me. You know what I'm saying? When I thought the bottle was giving me power. Damn, was I wrong, dude? It just made me incoherent. It dug me into the ground. The most powerful control that you have, which is crazy. We already know as alcoholics and addicts that there isn't really a thing of control, but there is this one thing you can do: walk the fuck away.
Yes.
That one is like, it's easy. Who's going to be disappointed? If anything, you're saving yourself, you know?
It's big facts. I talked to, man, that piece right there that you just talked about. So I've had the opportunity over the last few months to go into schools and talk to kids. Mm-hmm. And I tell them, I talk about intuition. We know, like, you know, we're like, and these kids know, you know, I've been in their shoes too. And you know, if you're in the wrong place or you're around the wrong group. And I just tell them, I'm like, when you feel that way, get out. I didn't do that. I stayed in it. Mm-hmm. And then I stayed into it to a point where it was like, I thought I wanted to be in it. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. Versus, you know, I kind of rewired my own internal intuition where it was like, no, it's okay that I'm in this place. I justified it in different ways. And I think what I tell kids is like, when you have those gut feelings, trust them, you know, get out of that situation. There's something there that doesn't sit right with you. Mm-hmm. And the walk away thing, it's funny. You said Topo Chico, your first experience, you were at this bar. My first experience of going outside of the house and like to an event, a bunch of friends were going to Rainey to watch football. And I'm like, I think I was 3 months, maybe 3 months. I'm like, man, I don't know. I talked to, at that time I was working an active program. I'm no longer involved actively in AA, but I support those that are, and I push people in that direction for sure.
Yeah.
But I remember talking to my sponsor at the time and saying, you know, I really want to go, but I don't want to put myself in a position where I get tempted. And so he helped me come up with a plan, right? And this was the whole approach. He's like, this is our plan. This is what you're going to do. If you can agree to do this, like, go for it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. Well, it's hilarious. My bar tab that night was still like $52 because I drank 13 Topo Chicos. You know what I
You were
mean?
nervous, dude.
Well, I was.
I
And I was just
understand.
like,
You're like,
yep, this is how, because and it also reminded me like, oh, this is how you drank anyways. It's like, that was just your reaction to like, oh, I don't feel okay yet.
It's anxiety, baby.
Yeah.
We already know. And it eases up, it goes away, but it still kind of inkles in the back, right? That's why I said it could be 2, 5, 10, 20. Your addiction still lives within you.
For sure.
And you, I totally understand like the feeling of just like, I'm a social person by nature. Like I've already, this is why I thrive at the job I do. Once I was able to get this personality that I thought was lost, and I'm in my 5th year, I feel like a 5-year-old in general still, in every aspect of the form with relationships with this. Each year seems like something I'm learning more and more, but it's just, I know I am like at this point where I am so strict at boundaries. Like, it's like I will not heed to certain things because sobriety comes first for me. You know what I'm saying? And no one can dictate it for me either. You mentioned the fact of like, I'm supportive of any group or any style of taking on sobriety. I wasn't actively a member of AA. I go to Ben's Friends. It's a sobriety group for hospitality professionals, but anyone's welcome. But the factor is, it's knowing moral ground. It's having a moral standing, actively doing things to stay sober. That service I brought up. And the number one thing I learned, like I'm telling you, I couldn't answer the question every time I got a call from someone or like a message from someone saying like, hey, dude, how are you doing it? Especially within like the year mark when I was very like vocal about my stuff. I didn't have an answer yet, but within the 2nd year, I knew exactly what to say. I said community. Community is number one. I grew up Baptist. I don't really go to church anymore, but I'm a spiritual person. I hold those values close to me because I feel like they got me where I needed to be. I implore anyone who's having an issue, you can't do this shit alone. Find community in some sense of the, however you might feel. You cannot battle an addiction or alcoholism or anything for that matter without being around people who are actively talking about it and ways to fix it, or people who are actively working in a different light, in a better light, being better at themselves. That's why you see things like within the last few years, like run clubs and all sorts of things actively pop up. People have we're packed animals.
We crave community.
We crave community. We existed. We made it because of that. That is a construct of life and evolution. So like, you need to find out outside of, and in fact, that's what put us in the bars. That one thing,
Facts.
that craving of being around people, you know what I'm saying? It's the thing that brought me into hospitality. I'll tell you that. I love that family aspect. I love that, oh man, this is a great place to be and create. And then afterwards, I wanted to go drink with them because it felt normal. It was a habit. You know what I'm saying? And once you get around a good community, you gain better habits, good habits.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's hard too, though. It's really fucking hard to break the conformity of like drinking and having a cigarette and all this. I'm an experienced dating people who have habits and I see it, but like I can't tell them to change. You know what I'm saying? I can only like hint at like maybe stop that, but blah, because I've also gotten to the point too, again, that 5 years of growing, certain things I've broken. I can't tell people how to stop. Just like how you can't call a person an alcoholic. I'll never call you one. That's something for you to actually come to a realization of. I can view it, see it. I can give you, if asked, advice, but I'm not going to tell a person,
What's interesting you bring that up because I agree with you and I try to be the same way. Or I am the same way. Because I remember how hard I pushed back when it had came out. Like somebody, I won't mention who, but in my immediate family, I was at home visiting. My cousin was in town, and he wanted to take me out to dinner with his new girlfriend and introduce me. And so we're out to dinner, and before we walked in the restaurant, he pulled me aside, like in front of her though, and was like, "Hey, so-and-so let me know that, you know, you're an alcoholic and you have a drinking problem. They serve alcohol here. Are you going to be good?" At this point, I wasn't sober. And I remember like looking at him and being like, "Oh, okay, I'm going to go in here and drink now, but I'm going to show you I can control it." So I went in there and sat down for dinner, and I think I drank 2 beers. I wanted a third, a fourth, a fifth, and a 20th because I was mad. And I left there with them, thinking, oh, he had 2 beers. Wow, he really controlled it. And I literally left there. And the first thing I did was go get more booze, you know, outside of that situation. But it was because, for me, if you're in that space where you're already contemplating, like, I think maybe there's something off here, or maybe I might have a little bit of an issue, and people are telling you that's what you are, for me, I pushed back on that. That kind of kept me from coming to that conclusion as soon as I should have or didn't. But like, I think it's important to let people find that.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
I've always knew, I mean, I moved to Austin, and as silly as it sounds, I moved from Houston to Austin in 2011 because I knew I had a problem. Mostly I was thinking about cocaine. It wasn't about the drinking at that time. I just remember the dope use was like ridiculous. And I was like, oh, let me move to Austin. Again, as silly as it sounds, because this city's probably way more party than Houston. But there was some niceties here. And I remember thinking the same thing. I already said to myself, oh, maybe I'm a functioning alcoholic. That's, I think, almost everybody says that. That's an alcoholic. Right. Because it's like you identify the problem. You can see that you deteriorate in certain areas, but the people who are like, just, I guess I won't call myself type A, but there's a strive in me that, you know, I was good at being an addict. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So I could function at work. I could do this. I could do that. And then necessarily it wasn't even the cocaine and all that shit. It was mostly I just wanted to survive. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to be able to make it to the next drink. I wanted to make it to everything, right? But yeah, if anyone told me there was a problem, I remember one of my really good friends, man, I love this motherfucker, Tony. He's like responsible for me getting some of the best jobs here because he told me to show up, right? But he's the only person I remember the 14 years I've been here that actually called me out. And man, did it piss me off. So I know exactly what you're talking about. We lived together. He used to see me come home fucked up, falling asleep in my car, just doing all sorts of wild shit. And he called me out like numerous occasions. And I remember just looking at him like, no, I'll show you.
Right.
I function. I can do this.
Well, it's crazy to think about too, the things we were able to justify. And I can speak for myself, but like in the same sense or the same breath, I felt like I was functioning well enough, right? I was still growing in my career that I was in at the time. I was being celebrated at work. I was being celebrated by family that didn't know the inner workings. But everyone was like, wow, he's finding a lot of success. Like, yeah, he looks kind of tired and he's put on some weight, but like he's really finding some success in this field he's in. And I remember being able to justify the drinking and the drug use because I was like, a real addict or a real alcoholic that's not functioning, they're not finding the success.
No.
Right. And that's how I justified it for years.
That's what we think. Yeah.
And the truth of it was I was just lying to myself the whole time, the entire time. And I think now in full reflection on it, you know, I don't regret my story, if that makes sense. The only thing that I think I would change, which leads me to my question for you, and I think I probably know the answer, but I wish I could change the people that I did hurt.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like I wish I could do something about that.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't change what it took as far as internally to get me to the place that it got me to get where I am today. Yeah. I just wish I wouldn't have hurt some of the people that I did along the way, or any of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's a chaotic road. that we take to get to this, you know, there was so much in my mind in the pink cloud era of my recovery where I was just like, man, I wasted so much fucking time. And I just remember thinking, like, why didn't I start early? Why didn't I start earlier? I could be a lot more successful than where I am right now. And again, like I said, each year is a building, especially if you're working hard at the recovery. And I remember third year, I just said to myself, nah, you got to stop that mentality of thinking that if you start early, no, you're here. Each day that I'm sober is a fucking win. What do I have to look back at it? I can look back at the bad things and actually thank God that I made it through it. You know, I have, when it comes to personal relationships, you know, I cost myself a marriage. I was engaged. I cost that. Thank God I still have that friendship, you know. And do I regret the hurt that I put on that person? Hell yeah, every day, you know. But, you know, I was forgiven by her. Thank goodness. Thank God. Same thing for the relationship that I had in the beginning stages of my sobriety, because even then I was an asshole. And she gave me grace throughout the whole thing. And I don't know, man. I look at, I try to think about the roads or the bridges I burned, and it's kind of like lightweight, surprisingly for me. I know it's different for everybody. I feel like I burned more on my own end. I literally did more harm to myself than anybody in my active addiction. And I just consider myself very blessed to have made it through half the shit I did, you know, because I need to bring up a point here. I remember going to AA probably the 7th time. This is like before I got sober. And I'm sitting there and I was judging every story I kept hearing. I remember just like hearing something about this dude. This dude was talking about hiding liquor in his toilet and doing this shit and that shit. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh man, that's not me. I'm not that. And I remember thinking when I did get sober, thinking back to that thought process that I had within that time about how much of an asshole I was. And to get this point across that alcoholism, addiction has no level.
Right.
I'm no different than him. I still stayed up till 7 in the morning. I went to the gas station and got beers. I still did coke at fucking 8, 9, 10 a.m. I did all these things in different levels. We all do it, but it was all the same shit. It's still addiction. It's still alcoholism. You know, and I had to break from that. And I have to also realize that the hurt that I was putting on myself was the hurt that I was putting on the people that I worked with that I can't see, right? Like I was going to work kind of shitty, half in, half out every now and then. And to my patrons, and I think about like, yes, I was successful, but at the same time, I feel like the caliber. And I think that's where I'm rounding it back to the regret that the only regret I can have is like the way that I wasn't successful. I could have been so much better, so much, you know, we think like we're doing great because we're just making it. And other people can see it like that as well. You know, half of everybody I worked with at the time at this really, I won't name names of the restaurants I was at because I want to be very mindful about that, but we were all in it. We were all active addicted. My chefs went through shit. It is documented. You know what I'm saying? Successful people with fucked up habits. It's, you know, and to think of the potential when we let go of all that. And that's why I think we live in such a beautiful time, you know, because a lot of these conversations are now open for us to talk about. Outside of just even my industry, I mean in life. Like we can now talk about mental health. We can talk about alcohol addiction and stuff. You know, the generation right before us, dude, they lived in it. They lived in it. They thrived in it too. But we've seen the repercussions of that.
Right.
And I think the generation in front of us see that. That's why you see the steady decline in the way people consume alcohol or, what kind of drugs they're consuming. Because to be quite honest, it's all going to still be here. But now you have to like look at the shift of what's happening.
Right.
Coming from my world, I already know that alcohol sales are down more than they ever have been in years. Am I happy about it? Inside, yes, there's a little glimmer.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we should be consuming something that's a lot more dangerous than certain things that exist that help the world more so.
For sure.
Right? And I feel sad because there's so many stories I can tell, and I don't think I'm at liberty to say certain things, but I have friends who are in jail for murder that I care about. But I also had to hear about the family that lost their people because, and that kind of shit hurts, man. That story is like, there's 100 of those stories every year. So this shit is serious, dude. And that's why it even makes me like kind of like question my job sometimes. Like, am I the one? Am I responsible? In the 20 years that I worked, have I been responsible for one of these?
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's heavy.
That's
and
heavy.
I think a lot of people who are in the industry who want to like stop their job or, I understand it. I've had like 3 friends like quit completely from being active in the bar service because of their sobriety, and I'm all for it.
Right.
I just keep going on because, like I said, I find a counterbalance by working in the non-alc sector as well, and I justify it by that. I'm not serving every night. I couldn't. Like I just said, like the weight is a lot to bear. Sometimes you got to really know how to navigate that. So it's an interesting thing, that duality. But it's going to still exist. And like I said in the beginning, I want people to understand they can still do this job, but just be mindful of how you serve and your own personal well-being, how much you can bear.
Right. Because
at the end of the day, it's just a fucking job. You can go on and do something else. You're talented at so many different things. As long as you have these right here, man, you can do whatever. You got these, you can do. In fact, if you don't even have it,
right.
if you got this,
right,
you can do something.
For sure.
Your identity is rooted in so much, and that's all it is. Mostly, it's identity. We have such we human beings we're meant for purpose. So once we figure that we don't have purpose because we've been doing something for so long, you kind of feel like a shell inside. But remember, you're not. If you feel anything like a shell, that's because you need to fill it with something else.
Right.
Something good, something great. And all of that too takes time. I had to build up my hospitality skills. I didn't start as some bartender. I was a barista. I was in school for art. There's other things I had, right? I built these things. So it takes time. And no matter when you start, I just turned 40 this year. You can restart with something else. God's given me like the breath to live another day. So I can start again.
Yeah.
That's what I love about recovery itself too. The factor that it proved to me that you can start again.
It's not too late.
It's never too late.
So you brought this up earlier, and it transitions well of what we're talking about right there. When there's this fresh start, and people refer to it as day one or, rock bottom or ground zero, all these different references. It's beautiful that you can start over, and there's lots of people that are living proof of that. But you brought up something earlier that I think is closely tied to this, and I think it's important to talk about, and I know we've never talked about it on this show, is when you're in recovery, and I'm coming up, it'll be 5 years in July for me. But you said earlier you feel like a child in a lot of different avenues of life. I do too. I feel like an infant. I literally feel, when I got sober, I used actively from 13 to 30, right? So all the developmental years, essentially, or a lot of them. And so I never had a relationship sober, like a romantic relationship. I didn't have any really deeply like rooted friendships in sobriety, like prior to 13 years old. I didn't have a relationship with a lot of my family before I was 13 that I can really remember. So everything that I knew, that existed with it, right? It was the drugs and alcohol existed with it. when I, by the grace of God, figured out a way to start taking those things away, it was eye-opening to me on how little I actually knew about anything. And it's still happening. Like you said, year over year, you have something pop up where you're like, oh, this is the lesson. I'm going through that right now. And it's still hard. It's still difficult. It's still terrifying. I still have anxiety around it. And it's like, I say that because I want people to trust me. Like you don't wake up one day and it's all better. You have pink clouds, you have highs, you have lows, you have all these things. And for reference for the listener, the viewer that isn't in the sobriety circle, a pink cloud is essentially like a high, right? Yeah. That's how I could describe it. Just like a super positive feeling of like, oh, life's the best. We're great. Everything's going to be okay.
The lingo.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is that. And the reason I say it like that developmental thing is because it really is, especially for a person who's been active as you. I started my sobriety journey, my recovery technically, at 35. And yeah, like you, I didn't know a day when I wasn't like, especially, I think mostly I became really much more addicted to everything around like 18. Mm-hmm. I had been exposed to a lot of stuff already. I never really could quite smoke weed. Never really worked for me. Like I was too paranoid. Yep. I think it's the anxiety thing. So weed was never for me. It's when I started drinking, it was like, then I became a bartender. And not to say the bartending is what got me to Coke, but Coke is where it really found like that upper. And it was like, it really attached. And when I say it attached. Like I needed it. And then the counterbalance was drinking. Mm-hmm. So it just really spiraled so much significantly more when I started, doing Coke.
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
I do you mind if we deep dive the conversation on cocaine?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I haven't done it on here yet.
Yeah,
but it was my drug of choice.
Yeah.
And it was the relationship between cocaine and alcohol for me was probably the most important relationship for the last 7-8 years of my run. Mm-hmm. Like that was the relationship I put the most effort into, was making sure those things were balanced. And I would love to deep dive it because I think there's a massive stigma around any drug, right? But I think talking about it helps lift some of that.
Yeah, 100%.
And I said this on one of my early episodes, like, you hear still to this day, people like, well, I did Coke, I didn't smoke crack. Like, yeah.
You're about two steps from it.
And I tell people like, I did.
Yeah, I've done some weird shit because of cocaine.
Yeah.
And I've definitely smoked it. I've definitely done some things.
Because there was I remember one night I was in Nashville. I couldn't find it. Couldn't find any powder. Mm-hmm. I found a homeless guy and he offered me a hit off a rock. Well, I took it. You know what I mean? No questions asked. Yeah. I was like, what does it feel like? Is it the same? Is it close? He's like, oh yeah. And I ripped it. And so I don't say that. It's not a boast or bragful thing. It's like, that's what it's like.
That is what it's like.
You are seeking that feeling so desperately that if someone tells you this will get you close to it, you're going to try it.
You're going to try it 100%.
And so for me, that's like how I try to start breaking the stigma around these things. And especially with cocaine, like I would never out anyone for whatever they're into, right? That's their business. They can manage it as they please or try to. My thing is people would be surprised at how prevalent that drug actually is.
It is so acceptable.
Yes.
Dude,
it really is.
When I say this, like when I lived in Houston, it wasn't just like, oh, this is like just at the party. This is like I'm at like the sports bar everywhere. Yep. You know what I'm saying? Yep. And this is like early 2000s, 2005. We're moving in there now. And the thing about it is, on a personal note for me, I remember telling myself when I was younger, my stepfather was a crackhead, and I visibly view it and this and that and that. And just like I said, I judged it, right? It was like everything's all right. Weed's all right. This is all right. Ugh. Yeah. Not crack. Not just like how I mentioned about the AA experience, about the dude hiding alcohol in his toilet. There's no fucking difference.
Right.
There's no difference between if you are abusing something, it's contributing to your addiction, it is an addiction regardless.
Period.
That's marijuana too. And and food. That's like I am a supporter of like smokers, whatever. But if you are over abusing it, you're abusing it in general.
Yes.
Cut dry.
Yep.
So cocaine's no different to me. And the sad part is now cocaine's killing people because of fentanyl. You know, I had friends pass. That's another thing. I never cared. And I put my life in danger so many times just from doing random cocaine.
Yep.
All the time. And that's the grip, like you talk about, that grip that it had. Like, I was just chasing to get fucking high just to keep up all night. And I did have a sense of identity in doing it too. Like, no lie, I felt so much more alive. Like, I'll say it straight up. That's how I felt. Like, I remember every time I would hit the really good part of like being high off that shit, I'd be like, yo, I don't want this night to end. I don't need this to end. And then when it did, man, the feeling, the worst the worst come down.
Deep bottom.
Deep bottom. I remember like laying for hours and a whole day just on the couch, same position. Until I could break. And I don't even know what breaks me out of it. Maybe the thought of going out and drinking and getting to it again.
Right.
And living that again. And it's like that like cocaine usage is so much more. I feel like it's like that. It's probably with alcohol, smoking cigarettes, right up there. Then you got marijuana and cocaine right about each other, right there.
Yep.
And yeah, you're about 2 more steps from smoking. And in all honesty, it's the same shit to me.
It is.
Like, it doesn't matter. Heroin use, it's the same way, because heroin use, I've done heroin as well. Not stick, but I've definitely ingested it, and it's the feeling. It is a feeling that you really want. You crave it so hard. And luckily for me, I didn't fall too hard into that trap. But man, it was hard to break. And honestly, part of like my rock bottoms that happened, because for me, I had many rock bottoms, thank God. None that really, really, really fucked my life up. But part of it is it stopped working. I remember when I couldn't beat the numb feeling with cocaine, beat the numb feeling with alcohol. That's when it got scary, dude. Oh man, I feel like honestly that's what led to my sobriety, because there was such a desperation around the time I became sober. I just remember I hit so many rock bottoms. I remember I got a DWI and a PI. That's a public intoxication. For you guys all know, really hard to get. I got those in the same month in 2019. Luckily for me, I only got a machine put in my car. Still kept drinking, left my car places, bought a handheld thing to make sure I could get in my car when I could. The desperation, I kept going. And then I just remember sitting there, dude. And it's the lackluster thing about my sobriety. I remember just every time I tell a story about how I became sober, I was like, it is so, like, I just reached the point. I was sitting, I took the last hit off a cigarette, and I just remember thinking, this is it. Like, I'm going to either die or I'm going to fuck it up so hard. I'm going to mess this up so hard that I'm either going to die or end up in jail. That's all I could think about. And I was like, just give it a try. There's just something in my head. Just give it a try. Just stop. And I downloaded an app. 30 days later, ended up in a group. 2-3 months later, still sober. Not knowing that was it. But I tell you, so lackluster. I thought it was going to take one of those rock bottoms to really get me. Though. It'd be like that.
People ask me all the time. So I was locked up 4 different times. And they're like, that didn't. I was like, nope. Not once. I never once was sitting in that cell like, man, I probably should chill out. I was literally thinking about getting out to keep
go
going.
Drink. I've done it before.
Yeah, 100%.
I've done it. I've gotten out one drink.
And it was like, that was never my bottom. Failed relationships was never my bottom. Financial problems was never my bottom. It was very similar. The night that I got sober, decided to get sober, was probably the least amount of, I'll just say it, fucked up I'd been in a long time. I couldn't find blow. I remember that. I was trying to find it actively. Couldn't find it. It was pissing me off because it was like, I'm in Atlanta in 2020. It was like Uber Eats at that time. You could get it. I mean, they were serving at the house. Couldn't get it. Couldn't find anyone. And I'm like, oh, bro, this is crazy. Like, this is Saturday night. Really? Like, this is what we're doing? Mm-hmm. And I remember I'd only had beer that day. I'd probably had like, I don't know, 12, 15 beers throughout the course of the day. So I was still very much like aware enough. And I went and looked in the mirror. Something was like pulling me to go look in the mirror. I can't explain it still to this day other than a spiritual experience. Mm-hmm. Pulled me into the bathroom. I look in the mirror and I look into my soul for the first time, and it broke me. I understood in that moment, I'm either going to die of suicide, alcohol, or drug overdose. Mm-hmm. But there was this little inkling in my head. I was like, what if? Like, what if, bro? Like, what if you just did the opposite of all of those things just for a day?
Isn't that crazy?
And that was it.
Yeah.
It was it. And I tell people, like, it's like that.
It's like that.
You know, people always, I think it's hard for people outside of it, especially family members, when they see people going down these paths and they see these things that, yeah, in theory, they should be bottoms, right? Like all those times I was arrested, that should have been a bottom. I should have woke up. I didn't. And so I tell people, like, don't put expectations around other people's bottoms.
Yeah.
Because it's only going to hurt you. Mm-hmm. Right? At the end of the day, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt the person that's creating the expectation versus just like, it's going to hit when it hits. And it might be something really bad. God forbid. I hope it's not. Exactly. I really hope it's not. Mm-hmm. I pray it's not for everyone involved. I pray that it's very similar to something like you and I experienced. That was just like
desperation is a motherfucker. And I feel like I'm so thankful that I couldn't achieve the feeling I was chasing because that led to me realizing that wasn't worth it. At the point, at time, I didn't know, but thank goodness that thought process was there of like, let me try. Mm-hmm. You know, I think also little hints were coming from the universe, from God, however much you want to say it, however you want to take this. I remember seeing one of my friends that I used to get fucked up with all the time, this local DJ, and he had posted to Facebook. I almost said MySpace. To Facebook. Oh my God, I'm old. To Facebook this 2019, and he had been sober for like 4 years. And speaking of crack, that's something he used to do. And I remember just thinking to myself, he can do that. Right. That's when around the same time I saw the Ben's Friends be posted. It just started that summer in 2019. How kismet that I'm seeing these things. They were just knocking around. I remember, you know, I was in a shitty situation living with a roommate who was an active alcoholic as well too. This person I will call that because he was very much an enabler. We were both enablers to each other. You know, it was a powder keg. In fact, I said that it wasn't a rock bottom, but all of these do kind of like, those little messages were coming to me. And then that one little like, hey, maybe you should try this was like that final like, hey, seek this path for a second. Just see it. Just see it. It was God saying, just take this path for a second and see if you like it. And man, I'm so happy I took that path. My goodness, man, you didn't even understand how much grace. And I'm going to say this one thing. I say this in groups almost all the time. I was like, be kind to yourself. It is so hard. Like I said, when I moved here, I knew I had a problem. It took 11 years to finally get to that new path. But that didn't mean the path didn't start all the way back there. Right. Because it did. It did. Because when you start to acknowledge, regardless of any relapse or anything, prior to that, I had been sober maybe 21 days. And I only know that because that sobriety ended, I remember it was 2013 or something. It ended after 21 days, did a whole bike ride, went to a tailgate, over. Play some beer bong. I'm done. Done. Dunzo. UT tailgate, couldn't do it. Yeah. Get it, but that was, you know. But, you know, just remember, like, the path is so different. It's so weird. It could happen instantly. It doesn't happen the way you need it to happen. Remember, you ain't in control. Right. You're not in control. But you got to want some sort of change. You got to, like, start saying something to yourself. A mantra, something. I knew I had a problem. Like I said, even saying the functional alcoholic thing was a joke to me, but I was saying it, which means I was still acknowledging it. Right. I was acknowledging something was wrong. And then realize too, I think it was different when we're coming up. Whereas like, cats will call you a pussy for not drinking. I remember back in 2011, 2012, it's like, you're not taking a shot. You're not, it's changed now. And also we got to realize too, we're adults. Mm-hmm. You really can walk away. You don't have to do these things.
Right.
Let these people do what they do.
Yeah.
Because they're people.
Yeah.
And you got to realize that. Again, it comes back to that anxiety thing. You don't want to be like them. You want to be like you. You want your identity. Well, then claim it. Mm-hmm. Take it back. I love taking this back every day. And we go back to this whole thing. 5 years, yes, I feel like a child, but man, does it feel so good. Because one of the best things about little kids when they're growing up is the sense of wonder. It's the sense of being able to just be. You ever look at a 5 or 6 year old? They're so in it. Mm-hmm. They're so present. And that is exactly where you can be after you start the journey of recovery again. You can reclaim it. You can rebuild it. You can have a sense of amazement, wonder. And that's why I said, you got this. You don't have to, regardless of what kind of job, even if like you're not in industry. And I say this because sometimes it's any work that can put you in this stagnant move of like, or consistently work with your alcoholism or addiction. You can stop. You don't have to. I understand too that money is number one. It's the way we have to survive. You have to figure it out. But remember, there's so many different ways to like work and to do something that you might not need to make. I would hate to tell somebody this. I want to achieve and make like 6 figures. But if it is a job that's killing you, don't do it.
Right.
If it's something, what's the worth at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Take a break.
Well, it's willingness too. Mm-hmm. I remember right when I got sober and I quit my career. I was making great money. Mm-hmm. People thought I was crazy. I was like, it's not for me. And they're like, why would you throw that away? I was like, it's not for me. I was like, I don't care if I remember telling my mom this. And I think this was like her first hint of like, oh, he's for real. She's like, what are you going to do when you get back to Austin? I was like, Mom, I don't care if I work at Pizza Hut and make pizzas. As long as I'm good, mm-hmm. I don't care. And I remember her, she was kind of just like, oh, okay. Because before that it was, I need to make more money. I need to be involved with this. I need to be involved with that. I was in a point in my life when I restarted where I was like, I don't care as long as I'm good. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's 6 figures. It doesn't matter if it's 5 figures. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like as long as I can have a place to live and food to eat and be sober, that was where I wanted to be at that time. Mm-hmm. That's what fulfilled me. And that's where I felt at my best. And I think that that's tied to the willingness piece, because I really believe when you're ready, you're willing to do whatever, whatever it is.
This is true.
If someone says, God, my personal preference, I believe in God, right? But universe, a doorknob, it doesn't matter. If whatever you believe in came to you and said, Bjorn, if you want to be sober, I need you to trust me, and I need you to go live under that bridge for 27 days and 27 nights. When you're ready to get sober, you're going to go under that bridge for 27 days and 27 nights. Mm-hmm. You're willing to do whatever it takes, and that's the desperation part too, because once you felt that desperation, you're willing to do anything to not feel that again. Mm-hmm. My desperation, I appreciate you sharing yours, mine was I was drinking and using to keep from having thoughts of self-harm. That was the split for me. Mm. That's not a good place, right? When you're actively choosing drugs or alcohol just to keep from hurting yourself, mm-hmm. like that's desperation, right? And each person has a different form of that, I think, when they find this place where they're ready to make a shift. But it's like this willingness piece, I think, to me, if there's 2 pieces to sobriety that I really believe are like the answers. I know we don't have the perfect answers.
Of course.
But I go back to community and I go back to willingness. Those 2 things for me have been everything.
Wholeheartedly agree. Wholeheartedly.
Everything. Yeah.
It is definitely everything. Again, too, it's so hard. Our ego will always, play on us And that's why I say it's a control thing. When we, even in this active recovery, I find myself in lows. But again, like I said, I'm so blessed with the present, to be present and to be able to take it on. And when you say this, it's like I'm reminded to go back to my community. I have to go to a group meeting weekly or tune into something weekly to hear something outside of my own body in order to be able to take myself away from my ego. We don't have all the answers.
Right.
In order to be successful, I feel like at recovery is that you have to listen. You have to listen to other people. Shit, I have to hear someone who's maybe I've been in meetings where I've heard someone who's been active for 1 month sober, and they've hit me with something that I needed to remember.
Yes.
Because that's how it works. We're no different.
I know.
You know, and like you said, the willingness too. It's that willingness that gets us out of bed every morning. You know, like I said, it don't matter what we do, work-wise. It's about getting up. It's about not just doing what you love, but doing something that can contribute to the success of your sobriety and to the success of the people you love around you. Even those you don't know, you extend that for service. I never understood when I was growing up in my Baptist family, you know, the factor of why you gave money actively. In fact, at this point, I understand now why. You know, people were like, well, why do people be giving in the church like that? Well, you're giving with knowledge of helping in some way. Whether it's to build that church, whether it's to build some new thing or give into the community that you're giving that to. You need to trust. There's a book I read once. It's like, we can't live it was in the Courage to Be Disliked, I believe. You can't like live your life believing everything that's going on around you is against you, right? Like, right. You can't always think that something's wrong, because that is not the way to live. You're living in this negative energy void, right?
Yeah, you're drilling me right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's like a feeling of like, that's why I have to release. I release these things, man. If you don't release this to your God, to your universe, if you don't release that energy, if you do not believe that there is a better good, a common good, regardless of someone's thought process, you know, this whole thing that we live in right now too, with the shift of political ideals and all sorts of different shit, I don't like to live in that.
Right.
I have my views, people have their views, but I need to love my fucking neighbors. I need to realize that I want the betterment, the best for my community, for Austin, for Texas, for the United States, for the fucking world.
Right.
This is not a battle against each other. These are the kind of things, if you keep your head in, it'll keep you successful in life as well. It'll keep you successful in sobriety. The reason I say that is because people tend to worry about the shit that don't matter, which is number one. People, like with the political shit, like for the election night, I'm sure there were some people who were like, I'm drinking myself away because I'm so mad. That shit doesn't solve shit. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, what's wrong with you?
Yes.
You know, we use these things as excuses to avoid the bigger problem, which is just being a human being and being a contributing factor to the betterment of humanity. And how does that start? By being better to yourself. That's why I'm so like, you know, you can enjoy a drink, go out, go celebrate something and shit. But once it becomes a problem and you're not feeding into yourself the goodness of life, then what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? What are we doing at that point? Right? You'll learn more about yourself once you let your guard down. I swear to God, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that being vulnerable was how I could be successful at sobriety, but it damn well is. It's how I gotten into better relationships with friends, with family, and with, you know, potential partners. I'm seeing someone right now, and she's, you know, honesty, vulnerability, you know, you got to do it.
Yeah, you've created quite a conversation around this. So, vulnerable share with you, and vulnerable question for you. Something I've struggled with in my sobriety is you talk about this concept of trusting that not everything is working against you, right? Trusting that things are actually working in your favor, and that the world and that life is in your favor, and learning to trust that. Something I've struggled with in my sobriety and recovery is always wondering if whatever's happening is too good to be true, just to build me up so that it can hurt me to pay me back for the wrongs that I did in the past. I carry that a little bit sometimes.
I totally get it. It's weird. Like I had the sense of like karmic value too. I always, when I was younger, there was a thing, I still kind of do it as an adult. Like sometimes I'll just like play a game of chance in my head or something to be like, oh, if this happens, this is going to happen or something. You know what I'm saying? And now you have this karma thing. I get you. Like the wrongs I've done is going to, nah, it doesn't work like that. I don't think.
Okay.
You have to get over, again, that's also, I think, your ego. This thing is bigger than you and I, I'm not gonna sit here and say like I've lived the best, like I've lived and did everything I want to do in life, but man, if I die tomorrow, I'm fine, and I can't dictate that one. If I was to find out I had some terminal illness tomorrow, I hope to God I don't. Right? I think I would be okay with it, and I wouldn't look at it like I'm being punished.
Yeah, it's interesting though.
It's an interesting thought, and I think this is what a lot of people live with, especially when you do live the sort of addiction that really has like, you've really burnt bridges and you've really done some things, or in general, if you just are that person who's lived that and you finally found the right road to go on. Yeah, it's hard. There isn't, I don't think in the sense of merits.
Okay.
It's hard I don't know how I broke that one though.
Yeah.
I just feel because we're all sinners.
Yeah.
And in the way I live, the way I grew up, it's like, yeah, man, if you look a certain way, if you accept Christ, or you do certain things to accept a life of good moral standing, you're gonna be redeemed. And I do think everyone can be redeemable, and I don't think it just comes back to you. We all have to suffer, or not suffer, but we all have the same fate,
right? Which
is death,
right?
And I don't think death is a bad thing.
Right.
We
need it.
We need it. But that's the thing too. It should remind you to live this fucking life. It should remind you to live this life the way you need to live it, and to be present with those that you care about and love. And that's why I say, like, at the end of the day, it's like one of the biggest things we said about willingness and community. I think honesty, truth is like another big pillar of continuously living a life of good virtue and a good recovery thing. It's hard, but like I'm telling you, it's easier to go through.
Yes, it is.
Than it is to, it's easier to go through.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think on that same thought, or that same token, another thing that I've struggled with in my sobriety is there are good people, like lots of good people in this world. And what I've struggled with is, it's honestly projection, but it's like, oh, if this person does X, it's because they're getting ready to do Y. But really, it's just what I would have done.
It's what I know that one too.
And I've had to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that comes with loss sometimes. That like, not everyone's wired that way. Some people actually mean what they say.
100%.
And some people are trustworthy.
Yeah.
And some people do love with all of their heart, right? Like, and are compassionate people. It's not a front. I've had to learn that. And that's new to me. That's part of this infancy we're talking about, of learning that not everyone, and this is ego too, but like not everyone is me.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I find it weird when people are being overly nice. I'm sorry. I'm a Texan. So obviously, the hospitality is like, and living in the world of like working in hospitality, it's like niceties is great. But I totally understand where you're coming from. Like I said, the benefit of the doubt is something that I have to live in. I say this also with the mindset of remember to have boundaries. Like, I'm not saying forget your boundaries,
right?
Because you will totally get used if you just all willy-nilly give everybody the truth. But you can't live in the face of being like, I can't trust everybody. You know what I'm saying? It just can't. You can't live like that. So I don't. I think one of the reasons I am successful within my work and now within like even just my interpersonal relationship with family and loved ones is because I don't filter no more. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, it's being that kid thing again. Maybe it's something I need to learn too, right? Mm-hmm. It's like a 6-year-old's gonna tell you, ooh, why you got that on you? Why you know, what's on your nose? You know what I'm saying? Or like, you know, you look ugly. I swear to God, kids are, you know, they'll say what they have to say. And I feel like I am at that stage as well, where it's like I have to tell it like it is to protect myself as well. So I don't know if that like answer. I kind of like,
that's perfect. It leads me to the next question for you is like, and this is my own curiosity. Mm-hmm. I know you said that you've been seeing someone. Mm-hmm. Do you, is partnership or parenthood, like, is that something you're interested in? As far as long-term? I
feel like that's always been a question of like, whatever partner I end up with, mm-hmm. you know, it's going to be up to the lady and myself to decide like what we're going to do. Yeah. I've never had the desire to have a child. I always want to adopt, I feel like. Which then brings the question, a lot of women, why don't you get a vasectomy then? I was like, I don't know, because maybe I'll change my mind. But you can get it cut. No. I was like, that's my personal thing too, right? But I really do. I feel like, I've said this once in group. I think one of the feelings I always had in my mind is to be sitting on the porch with someone I love and just watching the grass or wherever we live and just looking out and enjoying life like that. Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny, like I would have never thought in my life that I would ever just want simplicity like that. Mm-hmm. But man, it sounds so good to me. Mm-hmm. It sounds so good to me. All the complications in life and all this other stuff really don't mean shit if you don't have someone that's got your back. So yeah, I want a good partnership. And trust me, I've done the whole thing. I've done open relationships within my open sobriety. And I'm open to talk about everything because I don't give a damn.
Yeah.
Again, because I you know, even this that I'm in right now, this person drinks. Oh, she gonna watch this probably. I don't know. Yeah. And it's something I'm navigating. Mm-hmm. You know, younger than me, something I'm navigating. You know, I don't know how long it's gonna last. I'm just, again, living in the present. Because that's all you can do. And just like you said, I can't project my things on there because there's certain things I see that I'm just like, because I've said it to her, actually. I was like, oh, because she's in the industry. And it's like, oh, you're going out with your friends, huh? Oh, you're coming home at 2 a.m., huh? I was like, oh, shit, I'm looking at myself. And then I think like you as well, like, am I
she
getting
must
it?
Be doing what I was doing.
Yeah, and also I'm getting what I put out. Mm-hmm. I swear to God. So maybe I have thought about it like that, but I literally come back to myself and I'd be like, hey, what are you doing? Allow them to be, but put up your boundaries. And I've definitely said things within the time frame that we've been dating where I've been like, hey, this does this to me, makes me feel like this. I've learned how to communicate. Yeah. Crazy.
Right.
Didn't know how to do that before.
Right.
I really didn't. And yeah, I don't know if this relationship is going to last. I hope it works out how it needs to work out. Usually I'm a pretty straightforward person. But you know, like I said, man, I have to stay present. Mm. If I start future tripping on this shit, I'll fuck it up.
Yeah, me too.
You know what I'm saying?
Me too.
I have to allow a person to work through their own thing. She's 30, so it's like I'm 40. She's just living the life I would have been living at 30. Mm-hmm. So who am I to, you know? But at least she sees me. You know what I'm saying? And she respects me. Yeah. It's not like some, you know, I can see that I'm active. That's what I'm saying. I'm staying present because we don't know. Right. You know, and I'll put this one out there for everybody too. If you're newly sober, I was told don't be in a relationship. Do whatever the fuck you want, but do not let it affect your own well-being. Mm-hmm. Like I do think I am of the wheelhouse where if you aren't in a relationship at that point when you're starting, probably shouldn't start it because you need to focus in on yourself. I think that's the most important thing. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to do that if you're trying to start something else because you got to give a lot. But if you already, because a lot of people are going through sobriety or going through new recovery with a partner already, whether you're married or whether you just, it's a balancing act. And hopefully you have a partner, and that's all we really want, a partner that can understand you for who you are and who can support when you're low, but also realize that you need to be just as good to that person as well, right? And I don't know if anybody knows, but there's places, there are groups for people who have Al-Anon, for people who have partners that battle with alcoholism or addiction. So you want to make sure they understand you, you know, because it's hard, man. Like I said, I give so much thanks to the person that dealt with me in the beginning of my sobriety, because she decided not to drink. She didn't have to. She just stopped. And she also put up with a whole bunch of my uncommittedness, because at times I would just become very, you know, because I was still learning. Mm-hmm. It was hard. And that's why I said, now I used to be so passive when it came to things. And I've learned, like, no, you have to talk. Mm-hmm. You have to communicate things to your partners, to your family. The ones that you're intimate with, like people you have these intimate relationships with, you have to be as honest in your communication with. Therefore, you don't reach a point of resentment. You don't reach that point of contempt. You don't reach that point of you being broken or you having to have anger or this and that. You know, some of it might be contrived. Some of the feelings you're having might be shitty or dumb. But if you express, you need to say it, you know, and try to find a way to say it without being horrible at it, right. You know, being mean, and to just say it. You know, like I said, I've had these conversations with her about how the drinking can affect me or will affect me. And honestly, I've drew a line. I said, if it does come to a point where it doesn't feel good, it will have to end. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. I love the way that that you're kind of structuring all this, because what I've learned, and it wasn't until my most recent experience, we'll say, that I'm currently in, is that, like, there are some people it's safe to speak freely with, mm-hmm. and tell your truth. In the same breath, learning how to construct it in a way that's not harmful, right? To set a boundary, or to say, like, hey, you know, when this happened, it made me feel like this, and it just didn't really feel great. Is there something we can figure out together to kind of navigate that? Mm-hmm. Versus prior to, what I would do is just shove it down. And eventually it comes out, drinking or not, in not the best way, right? You say things that are harmful, that come off like horrible, mm-hmm. honestly. And you look at it in reflection, you're like, man, if I would have just addressed it on the spot, like a 5-year-old or 6-year-old would do, it's gone. It's free.
It's gone. It's out. Yeah.
And the right person, the right people, the right partner, they're at least, at a minimum, they're going to hear you. That doesn't mean that they're going to appease to everything that you're saying. And they shouldn't, because they should have boundaries too. But the right person or right people, the right partner, they're going to hear you. And that's been a new experience for me. I feel heard. I feel seen. Mm-hmm. And the way that they're able to communicate back with me also helps me feel heard and seen.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hey, let me meet you where you're at.
100%. And that's what you really want. That's all you want. That's all we need in a good functioning relationship. And I don't want to be up the wheelhouse of saying all relationships. I think you learn everything from every relationship you have. Mm-hmm. You know, that's even stemming to your family. It is what shapes you. My alcoholism was shaped by certain things it's in me. I'm not going to put it all on my family. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to scapegoat this shit to my family, right. Because it's not them.
Right.
It's in me. I saw things. Like I said, my stepfather was an active, addict. And I remember telling myself, I can't do this. My mom smoked cigarettes. I remember telling myself, I'm not going to do this. Out of anger, out of all the things that I felt was wrong, my upbringing, I decided to pick up a pack of smokes. I decided to drink. I did that shit. But we have a tendency to be imprinted. Mm-hmm. I don't want to imprint on my fucking. I want to imprint good values on whatever relationship I'm building at this point. Mm-hmm. That's why I said, like, I'm present in this relationship because I need her to see me, and she does see me. And she does respect, and I respect back and allow her to be her. And hopefully we can grow. And hopefully, I'm not like, you're like end drinking and stop drinking, but I hope she can understand that it's not necessary to do the things that you do in excess. And again, if it becomes an issue that doesn't work with me, I can walk on. It's fine. Life will continue to life on.
It's going to.
Like, it's going to happen. And it makes me sad to think that and to actually even say that out loud, but that's the truth.
It is the truth.
And maybe there's a relationship out there for me and I'll work out the way I need it to, but I need to put in my head as well that I can't just start thinking about that ahead. I need to stay where I am.
Be here.
100%.
Me too. And that's helpful for me to hear because it's the absolute truth. And you know what's crazy to me is us of all people should know this truth deeply. We should know that it's going to be okay, right? If we're here, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because we've both been in positions that aren't okay, right, in the past. A breakup should not end us, right? Life's going to go on.
It's going to go on. Yeah.
You're don't get me wrong. Now, a good heartbreak, soul crushing. It hurts. It's painful. It's honestly, like, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It sucks. But in the same breath, the world's still turning, man. Community's still around.
Yeah.
We still have opportunity. And I love that you put it that way. And it's not that I look for that. It's not that I'm saying, like, okay, when this happens. No. I'm hopeful. I have hope. I have faith. But I also need to remind myself, like, this is where I'm at right now. This is where she's at right now. This is where we're at right now. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I've had to learn, and I'm still working on it hard, to just be okay with what it is.
Yeah.
And not trying to create something all the time. Because what that does for me is it just creates stress, anxiety of, like, oh, let me try this and maybe that'll, it's me taking control.
Yeah.
And in reality, to your point, like, that's never going to work. You got to let that person be who they are. And you got to be who you are. And at the end of the day, if those two things can mesh, that's beautiful.
Thank God. Yeah. There's always an ebb and flow.
Yeah.
And you see, that's why I had to, like, I had to, like, hold myself there. And it's hard, Chip. It's hard, dude. Like, it is really hard because in all reality, I'll say it out loud. I would prefer to date someone who didn't even touch liquor, but, that brings my my little circle down to nothing. I believe there are people who are out there who can consume responsibly that are successful. I see it. I know it.
Right.
I've talked and went on dates with women who are like that. So to me, it is not a thing of, like, this needs to be this way, because once I put that on, it just, no, your expectations are totally messed up. You can't dictate it. As we're saying, you cannot control this. The only thing you can control, like I said, is the meeting in the middle. It's when you meet in the middle, when someone can respect your boundaries and when someone can respect you as a person in your journey, in your recovery. And, I've been respected. Trust me. It's like people forget that, when you're young, it's like you're going to do what you want to do, but there's nothing to spite. It's just sometimes motherfuckers forget. I did it all the damn time. It's how I pissed off my exes and did things that was really messed up. But they didn't let go, like, right off the bat. But the fucked up part is we didn't talk. There was no talk, because mostly on me. I'll put that one there, but it wasn't there. But it's also because we were young and all these things. And I actually can attribute a lot of the good things to my life too, or not just like to sobriety, but just me being older. in general, and going through all this shit, now I can understand this is how communication, honesty, this stuff makes more sense instead of running away from everything, running away from the truth, holding things in, being passive, using things against my partner or even my family. The best part of almost everything within my interpersonal relationships is the day, and this is way before I even got sober. I remember I called my mom in 2009. I was still living in Houston, and I had just had like one of the craziest bender ever. And for some reason, I called her, and I must have still been high too. And I called her, and I cried. And I told her, I was like, I understand what you were going through. I understand it now. And I'm so sorry. And I don't think she had absolutely no fucking clue what I was talking about. But what I was talking about is because my mom dealt with a lot of drinking. Again, I can't call her alcoholic. She just drinks heavily. And she left us, my little brother and myself, at a young age. I left home at 17. It was really chaotic. Not gonna say it was the worst upbringing. My mom was a good woman, but she went through a lot of shit. And that's what I was calling her about, to finally feel like, I don't know how high I was, but I felt it. I was like, I get it. I was like, I understood for the first time. I think I might have been 25 at the time. Like, I was like, I see how you got lost. I could see how you got lost. I could see how you were hurting. You were hurting. I know it because I'm hurting now. And who did I run to?
Yeah.
I ran to her. You want to understand why I did that? It's fucking family. And what did she do? Listen. She listened. And I didn't stop fucking around at that point in time, but I remember that was these are, like I said, it might seem like you're not on the path you need to be on. But man, if you're questioning and if you're doing something, know for damn sure you're on the path. You're on the path. It just might not come when you want it.
Right. Well, I think that's what's important to recognize is it's not on your timing. You know what I mean? The other thing you said, and we only have a few minutes, but I wanted to make sure we wrapped
For sure
with this, because what I'm realizing now is we need to do this again.
Oh man,
because we can go for a long time.
I got time, baby.
Well, it's because your vulnerability, and your openness, and like our ability to feed off of that with each other. Yeah, it makes I believe for really helpful conversation. Yeah. But you said something that really it like clicked with me, and it was, I'm not going to make my family my scapegoat. That was huge for me, and I think it's big for a lot of people. Part of this whole journey is ownership. And you've got to be willing to own your part, right? Absolutely, there are genetic ties and there's science behind it. And I mean, I'm not going to try to explain that because I'm not smart enough.
Hey, I'm no professional either. Yeah, but we know these. Yeah, we know this. It's very apparent that you know, your relationship, the way you have relationships with your partners or anybody, most of that stems from how you viewed your family, and how that dynamic worked. But is that all on them? Not necessarily, because it stems from how they view theirs, and so on and so forth. Yep. You can break the cycle.
Once you gain the awareness, it's on you.
It is, exactly. And that's why I want to break. You brought up a point about like having a family. I want it. You know, I would love to have a family, however that might look. And mostly when I even say that, it's just a partnership, but I need that partnership to be healthy. Luckily, I have broke the cycle. I feel like I have. Pray to God that I have. You know, and I need a partner to understand that we can work on our trauma. We don't need to hide things from each other. Right. That's a hard thing to fucking do, man. I feel like some of the most successful relationships, they still have these like, they're still like things that kind of like hide. You know what I'm saying?
But it's the ability to your point, though. Some of the hardest conversations I've had have happened recently. I mean, they've been hard. Like things that I, in the moment, I'm almost ashamed that exist within me. Right? Things that I'm like, this should not be happening at 34 years old. But when you find a person that can meet you exactly where you're at and say, I hear you. I hear you. And that makes a lot of sense. that provides a lot of clarity for me. Those types of words to somebody who's really struggling, man, they lift this weight, this burden off of your back. That's like, okay, I can continue to be vulnerable here because it's safe. It's not going to be used against me. I'm not getting beat over the head with it. I'm not getting called a failure. You know, I'm not getting called all these names and these things. And it's like, okay, for me, that's been so huge just to feel safe.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to speak for men or women and all this different stuff, but as a man, it's probably one of the first times in my life that I've actually felt safe in that circumstance to tell my truth.
Yeah.
And to me, that's been like one of the most incredible feelings, and I still struggle to trust it. Right.
It's hard because, again, it's another thing of like, that this one even stems from a social awareness. This conversation we can have for a long time, but just about how we've been told to be men. And I've come from an African family, man. It's like, you're a man. You know what I'm saying? This is not like, this is a majority of how we have been put into this box. Thing is, I want to be a provider. That's how I view myself. You know what I'm saying? When I'm in something successful, I would hope to be that for my partner. I would hope to be this source of masculine energy, source of comfort. But my vulnerability plays that too. It's in that too.
It is.
You know what I'm saying? And I have to accept that, you know, that's, you said the word failure, you know, like sometimes if I hear it, yo, fuck, man, if there's one thing I never want, don't call me a failure. Don't make me, you know, I don't want that.
Right.
So again, it is, we're in a nuanced age of how we can have these open conversations and dialogues. I want to see a successful, I want to see a lot of people in successful relationships, and however that might look for you. But I swear to God, I've watched some, I don't want to talk too much about my family, but man, I've seen some people together that shouldn't have been together for 50 years. And I mean, that's good success, right? But at the same time, I've seen some shit in it that wasn't right. And I don't want to call it out completely because I respect my family.
I'm with you.
But it's like, when something needs to end, it needs to end.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's just it's fucked up that, you know, people, again, like we can't go back. Like, this is just how it was in the generations past. But we can fix it. And that's why I say, like, we got to break the cycle of like a lot of shit that's going on.
Well, I think to speak on to not overstep either, but similar familial experiences, right? I think to what you're alluding to. The difference now is there's consequences behind those actions.
Oh, yeah. Right. Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Back in the day, it wasn't consequential in the same way.
No.
It was like, okay, I'll be mad at you, I'll be upset, but I'm still going to maintain the home. I'm still going to cook. I'm still going to clean. I'm still going to make sure the kids are good as long as you're going to work. Right? And I'm not saying that that's directly everyone's situation. I'm saying back in the day, the consequence wasn't, I'm leaving. I'm taking the kids. We're getting out of here. You figure it out. Right? These consequences have started to pop up now. And that's why I think the divorce rate was, I mean, it's insanely high, right?
Now, yeah.
But it's because I think people are realizing, like, oh, I don't have to live with this forever. Now, does that affect the children and all these different things? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah.
But because of that, coming from a divorced family, I now seek a different type of partnership, thank God, because it took me so long, right? I'm so grateful to this day that I didn't get married at 22 and have a child at 25 or whatever, you know, the social norm is. Because I would have most likely ended up in a situation that was very close to my parents. Because that's what I knew. That's how I operated. So thank God that didn't happen. But, and I can't remember where I was going with this, but in the same breath, there's consequences now for those actions. That's what I was getting at. Like, people, you have to, like, people are thinking about, well, I probably shouldn't do that because if I do that, then
it's going to, domestic issues and stuff, you know what I'm saying? It's like back in those generations, you did this for the sanctity of home. This is what you're supposed to do. Nowadays as well, too. And this goes without even marriage itself. It's like you can't use relationship as a saving block for life.
Right.
You got to know who the fuck you are before you go into something like that. In fact, you don't necessarily need to know completely who you are. You need to know where you want to be, where you need to go. You understand what I'm saying? There's nothing wrong with marrying your high school sweetheart and all that shit. There really isn't, if you feel like that's something you need to do. But remember, once you make that bond, or when you do that bond, you are dedicating yourself to somebody, right? It's an important thing. You're the one, if you believe in that, that is important, and you respect it.
Yeah. No, big facts.
Don't. This is why I take the shit seriously. My brother has I have like beautiful nieces and nephews, and he's 10 years younger than me, and thank God he's the one that had the kids, because my mom lays off of me. But it wasn't traditional about how he's doing his thing. It's a little out there. I wouldn't do it. My mom gets on him still too about like how he's doing his thing, because he has two different. I'm putting his business out there. I love my brother. I love him. He's a smart dude. Still, but it's like, but I do have a sense of responsibility about how I go about my thing, and I implore anybody to work on themselves first before they decide to put themselves in something. And that's why I think I take sobriety seriously, all this shit seriously, all this stuff about even yourself as a man, as a woman, knowing yourself before you get into something, because it's important, dude. People, and don't do things because you feel lonely. I'm telling you, it never ends.
Yeah, I've been trapped in
good.
that.
I know. I've done it myself. I've tried my best to be in like I said, I've been in open relationships, and I don't see anything wrong with that stuff. There's so many dynamics. We could talk about this one for a long time too, but I'll tell you this, man. I do seek monogamy in the sense of like, I know that is probably the best for me.
Right. Same.
It's just, but I don't see anything wrong with anyone who is in that avenue. But I'm telling you, know yourself.
Yeah.
And be honest. I'm telling you, at the end of the day, it comes down to how you communicate and how honest you are, because it will definitely eat you alive if you're doing something just because you feel the need to fill a void. That is literally what addiction is. You know what I'm saying? You're just over consuming in order to fill something that is not. It ain't gonna happen. Reality is probably the most daunting thing, right? To just sit here and be in it. But it is such a blessing. It is such a blessing. You gotta take this thing, and I don't say seriously, you gotta laugh at it sometimes, but also really get to know yourself and be kind to yourself. I'm telling you, being kind to yourself is number one. That's how you find the things that you need. It'll come to you. Like I said, this path is really fucking weird.
Yeah.
But if I'm telling you, if you just allow the shit to happen sometimes, and you just be kind to yourself, and you start to look at people, you start to have some empathy, I'm telling you, it will start to unfold itself to you in ways that you can never believe. I've never been so much more. You remember the success we were talking about we had like within our active addiction, even though we were like active alcoholics, we still got good shit, but we were still doing dumb shit. We were in this complete pattern of nonsense, being in and out of jail or this and shit. I have never been more successful in 5 years of my life compared to the last 5 years. The blessings that have came in my sobriety, I can't even fathom. I can't explain it. It's like it's just every fucking time something's just given to me. And I'm just like, dope.
Yeah.
So dope.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for it. That's why I always say, on this, you will not believe the kind of shit that exists on this side of it. Of course, again, always repeat, life still happens. People still pass away. You still get a flat tire.
Yeah, absolutely.
You still gotta pay your bills. Dumb shit gonna happen every now and then, but my God, the blessings rain down
For sure.
like crazy, because you're not in a active state of trying to control every fucking thing and not being locked up or sleeping and figuring out where the fuck you woke up at or this and that. There's no complications because easily You can walk away and sit down on your couch or talk to a friend. It's a beautiful thing, dude. I'm telling you. And there's no high that I need anymore. More so than just being able to. We run. I think the last we saw each other running in the path, crossing each other. If you asked me 2 years ago about running, I would have laughed at you.
Yeah.
The things that have came into my life from this thing, the health that I've done, I've lost 50 pounds of just literally living and, taking care of myself, really focusing in on things that matter more. I find so much more peace in these things. Like I said, man, the whole dream is just to sit on the patio and just look out and just be like, oh, dude, what kind of life? What a good life, right?
Yeah. I think that's the perfect way to wrap it.
Yeah.
What a good life. Man, thank you.
Yeah, man, thank you, brother.
Thank you. Endless thank yous.
Yeah. I can't wait to do it again.
We have to. No, we have to. We're going to get that locked in soon because I've thoroughly enjoyed this, man. And it's because there's many reasons. I think there's a lot of connection there. But our journeys from a time perspective too aren't all that different, you know, and the way we came to our change isn't all that different.
No, yeah.
There's just so much cool connection there. I think that's still left to be uncovered.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to have you back, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Blessed.
I appreciate you so much.
Of course. I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's going to wrap it for today's episode of the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.